Long before Dracula's bite and castles of dread, there was Carmilla, soft smile, cold dead. She came not to haunt, but to lie by your side, a kiss on your throat where secrets abide. Forgotten by many, but once you know, she never lets go. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bouquet and welcome to my horror corner, Bouquetified. When the topic of vampires arises, or when we ponder who might be literature's earliest vampire character, most would confidently declare Dracula as their answer, right? The figure of Count Dracula has become so deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness that we naturally assume he must be the original vampire of literature. However, this widely held assumption does not align with the historical record. Here's a fascinating revelation that might surprise you. Not only was Dracula not the first vampire tale in literature, it wasn't even the second one. In fact, vampire fiction had already established itself as a compelling literary tradition well before Bram Stoker penned his famous novel. Today we're diving deep into the haunting world of Carmilla, the 1872 Gothic novella that not only helped establish the foundations of vampire fiction, but revolutionized the genre itself. This masterpiece of Gothic literature weaves together supernatural horror with psychological tension and creating one of the most deeply unsettling love stories ever written. Written by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, a prominent Irish writer who helped pioneer the Victorian ghost story and mystery genres, this Gothic tale shares its cultural heritage with Bram Stoker's later work, though published a quarter century before, I repeat, a quarter century before Dracula, Carmilla remained relatively obscure compared to its more famous successor, despite its contributions to vampire fiction. The book explores women's intimate relationships and romantic feelings for one another, with male characters taking a peripheral role. This was unusual and daring for a book from 1870s, since back then society didn't really approve of women expressing their romantic or sexual desires. So Carmilla first appeared as a series in Dark Blue magazine between 1871 and 1872 before being released as a complete book. It's a Gothic story about Laura, a young woman who lives with her father in an Austrian castle. Their quiet life changes when Carmilla, a mysterious young woman or a mysterious young teenager, arrives at their home after her carriage crashes nearby. These two girls quickly become close friends, and then the strange events begin to unfold. Like terrible nightmares haunt the residents, people fall mysteriously ill, and the story builds tension while exploring themes of identity, desire, and supernatural forces. This book was one of the first vampire stories ever written, and the first to feature a female vampire as its main character. It helped establish many conventions that would shape vampire literature for generations to come. I stumbled upon Carmilla by chance and I bought the book right away, and actually it's a quite short book. You can finish it in a day or two even if you're not a fast reader like myself. I love reading, by the way, but I'm such a slug when it comes to reading pace and I'm not proud of it. But also I should point out that the pacing isn't always engaging. There are moments where I wish the story moved faster to keep me more interested. The narrative focuses deeply on the two main girls, but leaves other character relations underdeveloped. This lack of character development might be less noticeable in a film adaptation, but in a novel format, it leaves the story feeling a little incomplete. Still, Carmilla stands out for its groundbreaking portrayal of a lesbian relationship, which is an incredibly bold choice for the 1870s, I assume. And while it's not the first vampire book ever written, it's certainly one of the earliest, making it a worthwhile read for anyone interested in vampire literature. So be my guest, go give it a shot and let me know what you think of it. By the way, speaking of adaptations, several films have been based on the book, and I have recently watched the Australian Carmilla. It was an okay movie. If you absolutely can't read the book, you might enjoy watching the movie. But I'd still recommend reading the original text. For those who haven't read the book, I'm trying hard not to reveal too much, though knowing it's a vampire story does spoil things from the start just a tad bit. Now I will share a few points that Dracula and Carmilla, the two iconic vampires, share in common. Although it's never been confirmed whether Bram Stoker read Carmilla before writing Dracula, well, there are numerous similarities between the two vampires, and they're quite, how shall I put this nicely, obvious. First, both vampires represent repressed sexuality. Carmilla seduces women, reflecting Victorian anxieties about lesbianism, and female independence, while Dracula embodies forbidden heterosexual desires. In both cases, the vampire feeds on desire, not merely blood. Both Carmilla, a foreign nobleman who infiltrates a quiet Austrian estate, and Dracula, an Eastern European aristocrat who invades Victorian England, embody xenophobic Victorian anxieties about outsiders corrupting Western values and purity. Also in Carmilla, the vampire first comes to Laura's home as a friendly guest and slowly becomes part of their life. Dracula uses a similar trick. He moves from Transylvania to England and attacks women right in their own homes. Both stories portray evil not as a violent invader, but as something that slips in quietly, disguised through civility or kinship. People bitten by both Carmilla and Dracula get very sick in similar ways. They become pale, tired, and confused. And these signs were especially scary to readers back then because they looked like symptoms of deadly diseases like tuberculosis and syphilis. And this made vampire attacks feel like catching a dangerous disease that could spread from person to person. So both vampires demonstrate a powerful aversion to Christian religious symbols and artifacts, particularly crosses, holy water, and consecrated items. When confronted with these sacred objects, they recoil in terror and physical pain, and both killed in similar ways through special religious rituals carried out by people who know the old traditions. And finally, both stories share key Gothic elements that became famous in horror literature, such as old lonely castles and mansions, misty forests, complex female characters who struggle between feeling scared and being brave while dealing with supernatural dangers, and most importantly, vampires who aren't just mindless monsters, but sophisticated, mysterious nobles whose polite manners and refined tastes make them even scarier. And these common features did more than just set up what we now think of as Gothic horror stories. They also gave both authors a way to explore deeper ideas about sexuality, power, and breaking social rules. Alright, these are some of the things Carmilla and Dracula stories share, but are there no differences at all? Yes, there are, and I am about to share them with you right now. Looking at how the stories are framed, Carmilla is told from Laura's first-person perspective, and it's years after the events. Her emotional confusion adds psychological depth and unreliability. In contrast, Dracula is constructed entirely from various documents, journals, letters, newspaper clippings, whose epistolary style provides multiple viewpoints and allows for dramatic irony. Since readers often know more than the characters, this creates a structure that mimics detective mystery. So, let's talk about the pacing. Carmilla is slow-burning and intimate and dreamlike. It focuses on how Laura and Carmilla's relationship grows closer over time, both emotionally and physically. Instead of using action scenes, the story creates fear through its eerie mood. The pacing supports the ambiguous horror. In contrast, Dracula is more expansive and cinematic. It shifts across countries, characters, and social spheres, from castles to lunatic asylums and to London streets. The story builds tension through a series of rising action arcs, with climaxes in each character's storyline escalating to a final showdown. Let's talk about some character development now. In Carmilla, character exploration centers on Laura's interiority. Her psychological struggle forms the story's core. Carmilla remains enigmatic, since we never see her perspective. She exists as a figure both human and spectral. In Dracula, character depth emerges through contrasts among the narrator's perspectives. Mina's rationality, Jonathan's terror, and Dr. Seward's scientific mindset each illuminate different aspects of Dracula's menace. These different perspectives show how the characters must work together to fight evil, rather than face their fears alone. Okay, considering all of this, why does Carmilla remain significant and culturally important in literature today? First, it's much more than just an early vampire story. Carmilla introduced Western literature's first major female vampire, a character who was both fascinating and complex. She was seductive, has a complex character combining allure, sadness, and fear, creating a template for supernatural characters that would influence Gothic fiction for generations to come. Second, the novella stands as a pioneering work in queer horror literature, far ahead of its time. The story explores the complicated bond between Carmilla and Laura, mixing real love with dangerous obsession. In an era when same-sex relationships were not only taboo, but often criminalized. Le Fanu ingeniously utilized supernatural elements as a lens through which to examine forbidden love, desire, and the price of following one's heart against societal norms. Third, and my favorite, Carmilla changed how horror stories can be written. Rather than presenting terror as a distant, impersonal force, having a scary monster that attacks from far away, it showed that terror could come from someone close to you, someone who loves you. This made the story much more psychologically interesting, blurring the lines between what's safe and what's dangerous. Finally, author Sheridan Le Fanu created more than just another monster story. He developed a character who could truly make readers feel conflicted about where to place their sympathies. And just like that, we have come to the end of another video. Those were my thoughts on this classic Gothic story, Carmilla. Let me know if you've read it already, or if my video has inspired you to give it a try. I'd be glad in this case. Or did I miss any important details? Would you like me to cover other vampire stories that came before or after Carmilla? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and feel free to share it with your fellow horror fans to help our horror community grow. I'm dropping my socials down below if you'd like to chat, and I'm hoping to see you in the next video. Until then, bye! And top of my head is in the frame too, so that's a good thing. In Austrian. Okay. Maybe this should be my thumbnail. I'm gonna do this part once again, but it might stop any minute now, so fingers crossed. Although it's never been confirmed whether Bram Stoker read Dracula. Oh, no. Yet another vampire book with a pretty cover. Read it and let me know what you think of it. Okay, so we're done for today. They're lawn mowing just now. My video finished and they just started. I'm one lucky girl. How lucky I am. I just finished my video. Alright, I'm going for real now. Bye!